Hey guys, SGT here, and I have a very special guest on the line right now. It's the associate editor of Infowars.com and reporter and writer Patrick Henningsen. Patrick, thanks so much for your time and welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Sean.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. You know, my hat's off to everything you guys are doing there, Alex Jones, the Infowars team, for getting the word out, for speaking truth, and for trying to fight for the backbone of this republic. There's so much we could talk about. We could talk about NATO in Chicago, or how the Ron Paul revolution is sweeping up delegates all across the country, and the GOP establishment is terrified of this peaceful Ron Paul revolution. But what I really want to do, based on your recent writing, is focus today on Arizona. There's so much going on in Arizona. It's really a front line in this war against federal tyranny. We've got Sheriff Arpaio and the Obama birth investigation down there. Fast and Furious is at the doorsteps and affecting that state a great deal. And the so-called murder-suicide of former Marine and volunteer U.S. border guard J.T. Reddy, which you reported on. Where would you like to begin?
We'll talk about all of it. You're correct. Arizona is on the forefront of the battle. Fundamentally, this is a battle that I see through Fast and Furious, through SB 1070, through all these different issues and federal lawsuits against Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Arizona is at the front line of the battle for states' rights, and this is a battle between the states and the federal government. Okay, and basically, at some point along our history in America, the child thinks that it's become the parent. Our original contract as the 50 states with the federal government, which is the U.S. Constitution, gives very limited powers to the federal government and also defers most major decision-making laws and things that have to do with citizen sovereignty to the states themselves. And at some point, it's flipped on its head. And I think with this administration, this is a full, all-out effort right now to basically neutralize the states' rights. You know, we've gone from a federal government to a national government, and that's the big thing big point I'd like to get across. The U.S. government in Washington, D.C. is no longer a federal government. It's a national government. And can you see the difference between those two things? So Arizona has been dragged in front of the Supreme Court over its SB 1070 law. Essentially, this is a law passed by Arizona to simply enforce existing federal laws on the books when it comes to patrolling, policing, and their border with Mexico. Federal government hasn't done anything in that department, and so the Arizona has gone and just taken it into its own hands, and by doing that, they've attracted the attention of the Department of Justice, who's trying to slap a federal lawsuit on them. The DOJ's got lawsuits against 27 other states for either things to do with immigration or, border, specifically Texas and Arizona are really on the front line of that. And also Obamacare. It's something that could potentially bankrupt all of the states that are participating in it. And that means that if the state goes into debt or goes into the red because of something like Obamacare, they're going to have to go to the major central banks to get bailouts, to get loans to cover their budget deficits or things like that. And that's not even going into what it means to the individual citizen with regards to their, being forced to purchase something by the federal government. On so many fronts, that's what we're looking at right now. And I just got back from the Arizona legislature yesterday. I spoke with the ranking senator who lives along the border. And this is all going to come out in my Fast and Furious film, which I'm releasing on Infowars next week, a short version of it, and then a longer half-hour documentary that's really going into depth, looking at what Fast and Furious was, the gun-walking operation where the federal government shipping guns and allowing them to go into the hands of narco-trafficking criminals in Mexico, and in turn those guns have been turned on American citizens and lives have been lost.
That's right.
That's all come out in my film.
Let's talk a little bit about Eric Holder being in contempt of Congress. What do you make of this Republican discussion of holding him in contempt and holding him accountable for lying under oath? Is that really going anywhere, or do you think that's just a ruse?
I think this has legs. How far it goes is anyone's guess, but that's something that should have been done last year. And Representative Darrell Issa effort on his part to get these contempt proceedings moving forward. Fast and Furious is it's like Watergate on a plate. Worse than Watergate, because Watergate involved money, involved corruption, briberies, lying, perjury.
But nobody died. Nobody was murdered.
One died. Exactly. Fast and Furious involves lives.
Right.
Okay. And who knows how many lives actually. Those are only the guns they've been able to track. The amount of murders, burglaries, crime, carjackings, the things that go on along the border counties in Arizona with Mexico. It's untold. So this is a big scandal. And, because the Democrats are in power right now in the White House, it's forced the, Republican-leaning media outlets like Fox, people like Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity, they're forced to be real journalists now for the last 3 years. And this is going to be very unpopular for some GOP supporters, but when George Bush was in power for 8 years, Fox and other conservative talk radio people were just cheerleaders for the neoconservative movement, okay? Now that they're out of power, they're actually doing decent work. It's a more interesting media landscape now that Obama's in the White House than it was when Bush was in the White House. There was no and the liberal CNN is on record, and they are exactly contracted to support whatever administration is in power. And they do have a few liberal people in there that might have opposed Bush, but their job is the party line. Fox is a conservative, is truly a Republican-oriented news outlet. But if Mitt Romney was going to power, you would see all those people in talk radio and on networks like Fox. They would just shift immediately to close ranks around the Republican White House. We have an opportunity to unseat, one of the most socialist, agitating, Marxist presidents in history, and I certainly hope we do. But if the Republicans get into power in the White House, I really hope that they would have the common sense to look at things like NDAA and to look at some of these failed, executive orders that are just designed, and gun grabbing and Second Amendment issues as well. There's so many.
Yeah, well, we wish they would do that, but the honest truth is that if Mitt Romney gets into the White House, he's already said in a rally of his where a female audience member asked him if he would support or does support NDAA, and he said that he does, and that he reminded us all that we were attacked viciously on 9/11 by Muslim radicals. So it doesn't appear that Mitt Romney is going to change diddly squat, but we know Ron Paul would. So before we talk about the Ron Paul revolution, or if you want to circle back to SB 1070, let's do that. But I wanted to ask you about an article you wrote recently about J.T. Reddy. Now, J.T. Reddy is a former Marine and a volunteer U.S. border guard. I posted your article on SGT Report, and I have to tell you, this reminds me a lot of the Nancy Schaefer murder-suicide of her, she and her husband. And Nancy Schaefer was a really beautiful person. Alex Jones had interviewed her several times. She was an outspoken CPS critic, murder-suicide. We talk about Breitbart and now this arsenic poisoning of the L.A. coroner. It just seems to me that this thing has gone from in the shadows to perhaps, overt assassination. Am I off track here, or are you suspecting the same thing?
Well, the details that we've laid out and I laid out in that article, and by the way, Sean Helton, who's a resident of Phoenix, he really helped me look into that story and did a lot of the research on early media reports that showed that there was a report of an unknown gunman on the scene early, and those reports were quickly erased as soon as police had secured the area, and then police were then giving statements to the media. All the time with these events, you'll see the early reports. And you'll see the nuggets of truth. They do wash up in the pan.
That's right.
Or early. But, with J.T. Reddy, to me, maybe it was a murder-suicide, but based on his history, based on his profile, based on the events where you have, ICE and all these DEA and all these federal, the ATF, all these federal agents just, full on the scene, so quickly, as this thing happens. That whenever you see multiple federal agencies on the scene so quickly, that smells to me like they're there to basically cordon off the area, and not just physically cordon off the area, but they're there to cordon off the area in terms of information, and then in order to secure whatever damning evidence might be there in the scene. I mean, how could police have labeled it a murder-suicide if you have a 5-person shooting? The ballistics tests alone will take more than 24 hours. In this case with J.T. Reddy, they had this case closed within hours after the event. This is a mass murder, including a 2-year-old girl. To me, it looks to me like a drug cartel hit because of or a federal informant who works for the drug cartel, and there's a huge gray area there with subcontracting out wet work, murder for hire, with regards to these criminal gangs, and also with federal informants. You just don't know what's what. But a 2-year-old girl was slayed in this event, and that speaks to me like they were just eliminating all witnesses. And it's, call it a conspiracy theory, but do look at J.T. Reddy, what he said, what he's written. He's been portrayed as a neo-Nazi and a white supremacist in the media.
That's more the Southern Poverty Law Center talking points. Look, you posted a video along with your story in which we can see J.T. Reddy articulating as beautifully as Stuart Rhodes from Oath Keepers. I mean, this was a guy, and people now I've seen in comments talk about his troubled past, but he seemed to be articulate and had every reason to live in my book as I look at the video and learn about his history. But let's move on. Who knows? We've really got our backups against the wall in this country. But that brings me back to the Ron Paul revolution. Ron Paul is sweeping up delegates. I know you also wanted to touch base on the Occupy movement. So where would you like to go next?
Ron Paul revolution. It's I'm a big supporter of Ron Paul, and I did some viral ads for him in 2007, 2008. I don't back political candidates anymore, but made an exception with Dr. Ron Paul because, quite simply, his views, the things that he stands for, his fundamental values are completely in line with mine and my family's. So I feel confident to stand behind a guy like this who's so consistent. I know he's not going to flip-flop. I know he's not going to stab me in the back ideologically or politically. He's the ultimate presidential candidate in my book. He's founding father material, and he scares the living you-know-what out of the elite power structure and the mainstream media.
Thanks for watching Part 1. Don't miss Part 2, and be sure to visit sgtreport.com for all of my original content and the most important daily news. Thanks for watching.